Olá a todas, todos, todes. Eu sou José Adriano Buquerque, supervisor do FIC. Aulas Transversais. É uma ação do programa Fundação das Artes FIC, que foi iniciado sábado passado, dia 19 de setembro, com o Bate-papo do projeto Cachorro Louco, de autoria de Felipe Scalzareto. Na próxima semana, teremos um encontro com Maria Emília Gomes e Rita Cavassana, as duas professoras aqui do FIC. Essa ação ocorrerá sempre aos sábados, a partir das 16, e terá como foco complementar a formação inicial e continuada com debates, encontros, performances e bate-papos sobre assuntos direta ou indiretamente ligados aos cursos oferecidos. Para o encontro de hoje, teremos um bate-papo com Ceeline Ramonal, artista filipina, e Robson Ferraz, que também é supervisor pedagógico e irá mediar essa conversa juntamente com o Luan Gonçalves, aluno convidado da Fundação das Artes, porque esse bate-papo de hoje vai acontecer em inglês. Então, eu vou chamar aqui o Robson para adentrar aqui na nossa sala virtual.
Olá, boa tarde.
Boa tarde, Robson.
Boa tarde, Zé, tudo bem?
Tudo bom?
Tudo jóia. Estamos aqui hoje para esta aula transversal com a Dan. A Dan, na verdade, ela é minha amiga pessoal. A gente estudou junto no nosso mestrado em Dança e Patrimônio Cultural Imaterial. E eu propus que a gente fizesse essa conversa aqui hoje. Vai ser uma conversa em inglês e eu vou ter dois assistentes aqui para me ajudar nas traduções com vocês, que é o Cano e o Luan. Acho que eles podem vir aqui dar um oi para vocês.
Adentrem aí a sala, pessoal.
Adentrem a sala.
Opa, ô Luan, tudo bem?
Boa tarde, pessoal. Boa tarde, tudo bom?
Olá, gente.
Fala, Gustavo.
Boa tarde. Eu já, como a Dan é minha amiga pessoal, eu já conheço o vocabulário dela, ela conhece o meu jeito de falar inglês meio torto, a gente se entende assim, mas até o Luan é professor de inglês e a gente estava conversando exatamente sobre isso. Algumas expressões em inglês não tem tradução em português, às vezes é muito difícil você encontrar formas de traduzir a determinado assunto. O que a gente pretende fazer hoje eu pergunto em inglês, ela responde em inglês, aí a gente vai dar uma pausa para traduzir. E aí a gente gostaria muito que os alunos fizessem perguntas, assim. Ela é uma pessoa extremamente aberta e gostosa de conversar, tipo, é uma super amiga mesmo, estou muito feliz dela estar aqui com a gente hoje. Eu não quero me estender aqui na apresentação, para a gente poder aproveitar essa tarde aqui com ela. Ok?
Ok, então vamos lá.
Obrigado aí, vocês, e bora lá. Vamos trazer a Dana aqui para a sala, então.
Hi, everybody.
Hello,
Thank
how
you
are
for
you?
inviting me. I'm fine. How are you?
I'm good, and you?
Well, I'm glad to hear that everyone's good. Everyone's good, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, good.
Okay, so let's start. Do you want to say something? I interrupted you because you were greeting everyone, and I was there. And
No, it's fine. I'm used to it. No, but I just wanted to say thank you. Thank you for this opportunity to have this discussion and for inviting me to your program. It is my pleasure to actually take part in this. So thank you.
Ela agradeceu, ela disse obrigado, ela disse que é um prazer imenso estar aqui, da gente ter chamado ela para essa conversa. So, let's go there, let's start. I would like you to introduce yourself. Who are you and what do you do?
Okay, who am I?
At the beginning, who are you?
Yes.
At the beginning.
Yes, okay. My name is Ceeline Ramonal, as you can see in the screen, I think, yes. But my friends and family call me Den. I actually prefer to be called Den because my name usually opens up to other discussions about the first name. So yeah, you can call me Den, and I'm a dance anthropologist and artist from the Philippines, but I am currently based in Serbia. Oh, I got a little distracted.
Okay, now I need, but now I need to translate also.
Okay.
Ela disse que o nome dela é Danielle Ramonal, mas ela prefere ser chamada de Dan, porque às vezes as pessoas ficam um pouco distraídas em chamar ela de Danielle, nesse caso. Ela é uma... como eu posso explicar? Ela é uma antropóloga, assim como eu, e ela é bailarina também. You got distracted with it's the students' comment. We can put
okay.
students' comments on the.
Okay. Well, you're gonna have to translate those for me later, also to English this time.
I can do it. What's exactly your background? How did you learn to dance?
I have been dancing since I was 6. So I started very young. I started learning folk and ethnic dances at a very young age, which is actually quite common in the Philippines. Or maybe it's not. Maybe it's just common in my area. So because I was surrounded in a culture, in a performance culture where people, kids my age were also learning folk and ethnic dances. And then after that, I also started learning jazz dance. And then later on, it graduated to ballet and tap, which were more Western in that sense. So the forms became different from the original forms of dances that I was learning when I was very young. So.
Okay, a lot of things for me to translate. Eu perguntei para ela quando ela começou a dançar e qual foi o envolvimento dela com a dança, quando ela começou, na verdade. Perguntei um pouco do background dela, tipo, o que seria, de onde ela veio e nesse sentido. Ela disse que começou a dançar com 6 anos de idade e que na região dela é comum você aprender folk e ethnic dance. Folk, aqui pra gente, seria como se fossem danças folclóricas ou danças tradicionais daquela região. Sim, ela é bailarina, Gabi. Uma ótima bailarina. E dança étnica também. Depois eu vou perguntar isso para ela, mas na região específica dela, nas Filipinas, é comum que você aprende as danças étnicas que acontecem lá. Eu vou perguntar para ela o que significa exatamente isso. Ela disse que depois ela foi introduzida também ao jazz, ao balé e ao sapateado, que são tipos de danças consideradas western, né, que fazem parte aqui do nosso meio, tipo, a gente divide o mundo, assim, um pouco entre Ocidente e Oriente. No caso, ela sendo uma pessoa do Oriente, ela aprendeu também danças que são do Ocidente. I have a question for you.
Okay.
Because you mentioned ethnic dances. We don't have kind of, we have folk dance here. We call more a popular way of doing dance here. We call, here we say popular dance. The dance that are for how can I say this? I don't know. But it's more a kind of...
So it's like the categories, right?
Yes, the category is more like popular way of dancing. But you have ethnic dances. Can you explain this for us? What can mean ethnic dances and folk dance?
Because in the Philippines, there are categories to the kind of dances, the local dances. And the folk dances are usually referring to dances that have Spanish influence, because the Philippines was colonized by Spain for more than 300 years. And it's the culture of Spain is very rich in most of our intangible cultural heritage, especially in the northern part of the Philippines. For northern meaning Luzon and Visayas, because the Philippines is divided into 3 big island regions, so Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao. So that part, the northern part, that's where most of the folk dances came from. But the southern part, which is Mindanao, that's where the ethnic dances were from. And when you say ethnic dances, you're referring to the genre of, the intangible cultural heritage of the indigenous and the Muslim communities.
Uou, eu vou precisar da ajuda dos universitários.
Okay.
For this translation. Exato, Luan. Pelo que eu entendi, ela disse que, na verdade, as Filipinas foi colonizado pela Espanha por mais de 300 anos e que a região é dividida em 3 áreas. É isso? Besides, now, the third part I forgot, then.
Pode continuar, perdão. You mean the island region, Luzon, Visayas, Mindanao?
Okay. Yes.
Visayas, Mindanao. And the ethnic dance comes from the south, right?
From the south, which is the Mindanao area.
Exactly. The Mindanao area, yes. Okay.
You are from Mindanao. You
yes.
are from Mindanao area. Okay.
Yes, Mindanao.
E aí ela disse que, na verdade, que o ICH, que é o Patrimônio Cultural Imaterial do país, vem mais da região do sul.
Do sul.
Exato.
But I want to clarify, I want to add also that in Luzon, there are also indigenous communities, but up in the mountains, and they're the Igorots. So there are also, so they're like in the extremes. So yeah, I just wanted to add that in order to include that in the discussion, because I think it's important that we mention that there are also indigenous communities in the Luzon area.
Ok. Ela disse que, na verdade, tanto na parte norte como na parte sul do país, existem comunidades, ela diz indigenous communities, mas pra gente, quando ela fala indigenous communities, quer dizer que são os povos originários, como não é a mesma relação que a gente tem aqui no Brasil. Apesar de que é bem parecido, na verdade, a tradução, não sei, Luan, se você concorda comigo ou não, mas
os povos nativos.
Os povos nativos, exato. Olha, aqui o Wallace já deu aqui, Luzon, Visayas e Mindanao. Sim, são as 3 regiões aqui. Ela é da parte de Mindanao, Luzon está mais no norte e Visayas está no meio. Ela diz que, na verdade, existem muitas comunidades originárias em Luzon também, embora a ideia das danças tradicionais venham mais do sul.
Yeah, I think someone just mentioned Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao in the comments.
Exactly. Emilia is saying that she is very grateful in hearing you here with us. The comment that in the back.
Robson, e ela mencionou que essa dança, né, étnica, ela traz a cultura não tangível, né, dos povos nativos lá das Filipinas e também da comunidade muçulmana.
Exatamente.
Né?
I was forgetting this. Eu tava esquecendo disso. Ok, obrigado por lembrar, tá? Then I have other... Se alguém que está nos assistindo tiver questões que quiser colocar para ela, por favor, faça isso. Nesse primeiro momento, a gente está mais só aqui num bate-papo mais casual aqui e já trazendo um pouco do que a gente vai fazer hoje. Se vocês aí tiverem questões que vocês queiram perguntar para ela, por favor, façam aí nos comentários que eu vou fazendo aqui para ela. Now, in this section, then we'll be entering related exactly. You have a lot of experiences in these indigenous communities. How this kind of experience driven you to create the Finding Mindanao Body that is what we'll be seeing here today?
Well, when I was very young, I always had questions about the folk and ethnic dances, and then the other dances, the dance styles that I was learning as I grew older. But then these were questions that I used to just brush off and set aside because I didn't really have the courage to voice them out. But I knew that there was a difference in the teachings of the community elders versus the dance teachers of the modern stage. So because the objectives are also different for the ones who were teaching, right? Because you're trying to achieve different goals. And then later on, because as I grew older and then I got involved in humanitarian work, I got exposed also to more indigenous and Muslim communities, and I saw what they were going through. It's almost impossible to disregard what these communities are going through. And so with that, along with the fear that I had, because when I was in high school, I already was aware of the issue about representation of the indigenous and Muslim communities, because one of the choreographers who I admire, Agnes Luxine, was heavily criticized for converting an Igorot dance, a traditional dance from the Igorot, into a ballet dance piece. So at that time, we were aware, the dancers, at a very young age, I was aware. I knew that there was something wrong because she was criticized for it, that she was being culturally irresponsible when she launched that on stage. So that fear was already planted in my head. And I carried that fear until I grew older, and I never really thought about it, because back then, in the past years, as a dancer, I gave the responsibility to the creator, to the director, to the choreographer. That was their responsibility. I'm not going to worry about the cultural thematics of the performance. I'm just here to perform. That was my idea back then. But then later on, I realized that I need to confront these fears. And I want to carry the responsibility to actually talk about these kinds of messages. So, do you need time to translate?
Yes, I have. I need a lot of time.
Okay, go ahead. I'll stop.
To try to translate this. Luan, please. Kano, please. Help me. Ela disse muita coisa, na verdade, mas ela disse, como eu já a conheço, então eu vou tentar resumir. E aí, por favor, vocês aí, como eu já conheço a história dela, então eu vou tentar resumir pelo que eu já conheço.
Tudo bem.
Mas tiver aí, vocês, por favor, me ajudem. Ela disse que, na verdade, ela começou muito cedo a fazer dança, e as aulas que ela tinha eram aulas relacionadas, na verdade, à cultura ocidental, não à cultura da região dela. E ela diz que uma das professoras que ela teve, que ela admirava demais, foi extremamente criticada por usar essas danças tradicionais numa dança que tinha um caráter mais ocidental. E ela disse que, na verdade, só depois de muito tempo já na dança que ela foi entender um pouco essa relação das vozes que ela coloca, que são as vozes dos velhos da aldeia lá, que ela trabalha, que são essas vozes indígenas, assim, as vozes dos muçulmanos, em contraposição com essa voz dos professores e a voz da cultura ocidental, que só quando ela estava já mais adolescente, ela começou a se confrontar com esse medo, na verdade, da representação, de quem é que tinha, na verdade, o direito de representar ou não uma cultura, de como essa cultura é colocada, na verdade, em cena no palco. Todo o trabalho dela hoje está relacionado a isso, ela está confrontando esse medo que ela mesma tem, de ajudá-los a levantar a voz deles perante a própria comunidade deles. É isso?
É isso aí.
Disse tudo.
Wow.
All good.
Help. There is some questions here. Vocês querem?
Okay.
Vocês querem colocar as questões que estão aqui? Tem algumas questões. O Sérgio fez uma questão aqui. There is some questions for you.
Okay.
So then,
for me, yes.
you have already been in a lot of countries, right? So you got to see different bodies that dance and express themselves. How is this international experience has affected you as an artist that dances and express herself amidst your body, through your body?
Okay. Thank you for that question, Sergio.
Sérgio.
Yeah, Sergio. Okay. What I observed with performing in other places and learning about other dances in other countries was you become more aware of the structure of your body. because when I was and you become even more protective of your heritage. That's what I've observed with myself, because when I was learning, let's say, ballet, I knew that I was repeatedly told that I didn't have the body for it. But then the technique was okay. I was able to execute the technique, but then they kept repeating that I didn't have the body for it. So I didn't understand, and I felt like I was being discriminated when I was told that. And then I realized, now if I look back on those comments, it's something that's actually connected to what you grew up knowing. Because this is what I always say. I always tell people, if you look at a ballerina, for instance, as a dancer, I could identify that you are a ballerina. So the structure of your body will tell me that you have that, because the training that you have for ballet has that inclination towards linearity or lines. Yeah, so you have a long neck, you have long arms, and then the movement of even your movement will depict the kind of training that you have. So let's say the soft arms of the ballerina versus, let's say, a Pangalay dancer from Mindanao, then they always said, like in my painting, they said, oh, why are the hands of your dancer weird? And then I look at the hands of my dancer and I say, on the painting that I was creating, and I said, I don't see anything weird with it. That's the training. It's overarched. It's supposed to represent parts of it, movement of the waves. So it's not the normal hand that you see, or the typical hand that you see on a very dominant dance form such as ballet. So I don't know if I was able to answer the question of Sergio. I hope so.
You answered. Você quer traduzir essa? Ou eu posso?
You okay?
Yes, I'm okay, because it's a lot of things. Ela disse, na verdade, que ela estudou a técnica do balé também durante muitos anos, mas sempre foi dito a ela que ela nunca teve um corpo de uma bailarina clássica. Tipo, ela não tinha um corpo de uma bailarina clássica, e ela se sentia bastante discriminada em relação a isso. E ela disse que é muito fácil você reconhecer, ela diz que as coisas estão conectadas, é muito fácil você reconhecer o corpo de uma bailarina clássica por ser mais longilínea, pela suavidade dos braços, e ela fez uma comparação, na verdade, em relação com a localidade dela, com o Mindanao lá. Ela disse que, na verdade, lá, as danças tradicionais dele, as mãos, os dedos, eles têm um treinamento para ter um super arco nos dedos, assim. E aí, nas pinturas delas, as pessoas perguntam por que as mãos das pessoas que ela pintam são tão estranhas. E ela diz que para ela não existe nada de estranho, porque é absolutamente normal, aonde ela vive, ter esse tipo de relação com o corpo. Eles são treinados para ter essa relação com a mão, porque isso representa as ondas do mar. Foi isso? É isso que ela disse?
É isso mesmo. Ela disse também que ela fica, quando ela foi performar em outros países, ela ficava muito mais atenta ao próprio corpo, né? Porque como é uma cultura meio diferente, imagino que ela tenha que prestar mais atenção nos movimentos para tentar se encaixar e pegar a técnica, né?
Exatamente. Tem mais perguntas aqui. Welcome from your initial interest for dance. And welcome from your interest for dancing, both the native and the Western kind of dance, and what is represent for you?
Your question is, the question is, where does my interest come from?
Exactly.
Okay, exactly. For the native and the Western.
Exactly.
Okay.
Is this
okay. Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I guess for the dances from home, well, it is home. you have this affiliation. So the interest was always there. However, when I grew older, I was introduced to other dance forms that were more, I try not to use terms that doesn't sound right. Well, somehow that were given more priority. For instance, ballet. I remembered one comment we had as young dancers, and then we were given roles. Okay, you're going to dance this, you're going to dance specific dances. And then when a group of us were told to, okay, you're going to dance this specific dance from this particular tribe. And then I was wondering, at that head, we were talking, young kids were talking, oh, we don't want this. Okay, in our language, we said it in this way. This was a long time ago. Di ko na kay taga-bukid man na, para nas mga taga-bukid. So meaning, I don't want that because that's for people who perform in the villages, in the mountains. So there's this hierarchy. And
Okay.
it wasn't something that we were taught, but was actually introduced to us by people older than us. And so we also had that mentality. So I started learning a different kind of dance. And that's when ballet, jazz, tap came in. And I continuously did that kind of styles for a long time. And then I could see later on now at my age that it sort of like took residence in my body. So it was so difficult to actually try to break away because now it has become a habit in that sense. So yeah, so that's how I guess the interest was introduced to me at a very young age. And then it sort of swerved to a different interest and for different reasons also. So yeah, I'm trying to be as candid and as honest as possible with my answers because it's also my way of trying to still retrace my roots and understand my process.
Ela... eu não sei se eu entendi muito bem a resposta, na verdade, porque ela tem vários assuntos ao mesmo tempo aí. Então, eu tenho que tentar traçar um pouco aí. Ela disse que, na verdade, ela foi introduzida desde muito cedo e conforme ela foi crescendo, na verdade, ela foi entendendo que existia uma hierarquia ali na região dela, especificamente, do que se poderia ou não poderia dançar. Na verdade, mas eu sei a palavra em inglês, fashionable. Alguma coisa que podia ser mais assim, tipo, se você quer ser um pouco respeitado naquele lugar, dentro de uma comunidade de dança, você faz aquele tipo de dança, e aquele tipo de dança necessariamente é o balé. Foi o que eu entendi do que ela disse, assim, tipo, sei que vocês querem complementar aí.
Because I think whether we admit it or not, I think that ballet does have that very strong influence on overall the dances in terms of recognition on the modern stage. And this is embedded everywhere. And I think this has to change also. And this is why I'm trying to create pieces that would actually sort of move away from this kind of mentality. Because I carried the mentality with me for a very long time. And it was only fairly recently that I finally decided, okay, I actually want to talk about the topic about representation of the people from back home. But I never really acted on it because I was scared that I will be criticized. I was scared that people will look at the dances that I will present as backwards, like the way I had the mentality of when I was younger. And I was scared that I was not going to get the recognition because that's usually the case when it's a different dance form. So yeah, so that's what finding the Mindanao Body is. It's finding your way back home. It's a dancer trying to retrace her steps back to where she started, and trying to, break away from everything that has actually taken residence on her body without really disregarding them, because it's also impossible to just totally throw it away. It's already there. It's in your, I learned ballet and other Western dance styles. And I think it would be unfair to also not acknowledge the influence that it has on my performance, on the way I present my art. So this is what I'm trying to say.
Okay, let me try to to translate this. Deixa eu ver aqui por onde eu começo a tradução aqui dela. Ela diz que, na verdade, enfim, acho que é algo muito parecido com o que a gente passa por aqui no universo da dança. Balé é uma técnica que é mundialmente respeitada e mundialmente está no lugar, assim, eu, pelo menos, também, assim como ela, quando eu comecei a dançar, todo mundo dizia pra gente assim, você precisa fazer balé se você quer ter algum tipo de reconhecimento dentro da sua carreira. Você precisa fazer balé, porque fazendo balé você vai dançar qualquer outra coisa. E ela diz que, na verdade, conforme ela foi crescendo e foi entendendo esse lugar da representação, que é o que ela está nesse momento investigando, ela quer entender, na verdade, como isso tudo afetou o corpo dela, de uma maneira geral, porque ela foi treinada nisso, mas ela também foi treinada nas danças tradicionais do país dela. E nesse momento ela fala que esse projeto todo, o Finding the Mindanao Body, que é o que a gente vai ver daqui a pouquinho, é um pouco isso, ela está confrontando os próprios medos que ela tem de levantar a voz dela nesse lugar, que não é um lugar que as pessoas estão acostumadas a ver um outro tipo de tradição de dança acontecendo. Então, ela diz que ela tem muito medo disso, na verdade, assim, o medo da discriminação, o medo de não ser entendida, o medo de ter que realmente se confrontar com esse lugar, assim, de onde ela vai estar a partir de agora, que ela está falando pela própria voz dela. Acho que é mais ou menos isso. Then we have a lot of questions for you. But,
yes, I see.
Yes,
but there's an English question here that I see. Have you ever felt disrespected in your area for being a non-European woman? How did you deal with it? Okay.
Maybe I can put a lot of questions together. There is this one. There is another person asking if the indigenous population are in dangerous places now, if these ICH are threatening of disappearance, is another question. So you can answer this too.
Okay. There are many communities in Mindanao, but the problem with some of the communities are affected by the armed insurgencies that are happening between the rebel groups and the Philippine army. So when they have the conflict, it's always the indigenous communities that are affected. So when they're affected, they are displaced. So when they are displaced, they either end up unable to retain the kind of culture that they had from where they came from, and ended up adapting to the new place. It's actually dependent on how dominant the other culture is, if they are displaced. But that's what's one of the problems. And then there's the natural disasters, because the Philippines is always hit by the typhoon. And when there's that, they're displaced again. So displacement is a very big issue, because when that happens, tendency is the culture, the heritage is lost, either along the way or where they have been, where they ended up in. And so there are also there are also indigenous groups that have already combined. So for instance, there was this group, it was the Manobo, and then they ended up being in one place together with the Mamanwas, and then in the end, the more dominant group was the Manobos, and the Maman was sort of their ways sort of disappeared. So there's that, and there are many examples. But the problem with the indigenous communities, they're rarely heard. You don't always hear their voices. You don't always see them presenting their culture outside. The ones who are always doing that are outsiders. And this is also something that that I was very careful about, because I think it's important that there is always a voice from the community who would give an input on these kinds of work. So for instance, when I was working with GIZ, one of the projects that we had was documentation of IKSP. So it's Indigenous Knowledge Practices System. So our goal was, this should not be our voice, but the voice of the Manobos. So what we ended up doing was training them on how to actually document by giving them the skills, like teaching them how to take photos, teaching them how to write a book and all that. And it was written in their own language. So these kinds of projects also help out in ensuring that the culture stays on and it remains as is. But this is just one of them. There are others also.
Ok, let me try to say this. Ela falou que, na verdade, existem muitas questões que acontecem lá nas Filipinas, existem conflitos armados entre parte do exército e parte de grupos rebeldes, e que constantemente faz com que os grupos tradicionais, eles precisam se deslocar constantemente no espaço. Ela diz que, além disso, existem desastres naturais que acontecem na ilha. Eu não entendi qual é o desastre natural exatamente que ela falou.
Um tufão, acho.
Um tufão.
Tufão. Ela diz que existem os desastres naturais lá também. Faz com que, na verdade, essas comunidades, elas precisam se locomover muito. E, às vezes, acontece que uma comunidade que é maior acaba englobando uma comunidade que é menor. E quando isso acontece, esses conhecimentos mais tradicionais, eles acabam se transformando e se readaptando. E aí ela falou dos Manobos, que é um grupo maior, que acabou englobando um outro grupo lá. Aí ela disse que ela também trabalhou, como ela trabalha dentro da relação humanitária, ela foi introduzida dentro de um grupo de trabalho que trabalhou com uma comunidade, que eles ensinaram, na verdade, os tradicionais a como tirar fotografia, a como escrever, a como criar materiais que pudessem, de alguma maneira, ajudá-los a reter as informações que eles tinham, que eles gostariam de guardar, que eles gostariam de manter viva nas tradições. Mas ela disse que isso também é muito complicado, que não é fácil isso acontecer. Ela falou, isso foi apenas uma comunidade que ela conseguiu trabalhar. E ela é muito preocupada com essa relação, assim, da voz, de escutá-los, de dar voz a eles, mas também de deixar com que eles usem a própria voz, que eles tenham a própria voz deles, que eles não dependam, por exemplo, dela ou de outra pessoa para que vá ajudá-los nesse processo, entendeu?
Oh, and I wanted to add also another issue that the indigenous communities are experiencing are ancestral land encroachment of mining and logging companies. So, and that led to displacement also for them. Just wanted to add that up because I forgot to mention that part.
Vocês traduzem aí, porque eu estava falando.
Ela disse de outros problemas também que a comunidade tem, que eu não entendi quais são exatamente. São... Diga.
Pode falar. What are the problems that you mentioned that the community have?
One first was the armed insurgencies, where they are not part of it, but they get involved in it because they're sandwiched in an area where the armed insurgencies are happening. So this is the armed insurgencies between the rebel groups and the Philippine army. So that's one, and it leads to displacement. Number two was natural disasters. So that's also displacement. And number three is the one that I just mentioned a while back, which is the encroachment on their ancestral lands by the mining and logging companies.
Ok, thank you. Essa última parte aqui, a gente já tinha falado dos conflitos armados, a gente já tinha falado da relação dos desastres naturais, mas ela falou da terceira. Ela falou que existem muitos grupos de mineradores, na verdade, que acabam invadindo as terras ancestrais, e aí também isso causa a mudança desses grupos indígenas daquele lugar.
Isso. E madeireiros também.
Isso.
Mineradores e madeireiros.
Then I think it would be nice now we see your video, and because there is a lot of questions, and I will everyone to continue making questions, but I don't know if the video already answers some sort of these questions. So I believe entering the video, and then we come back and continue talking. What do you think?
Yes, go ahead, yeah. And I'd like to answer that question in English later after the video. It's the only question that I understand. So, I mean, because it's in English. So, yeah. Have you ever felt disrespected? Yes. I think you've seen this when we were together, Hobson.
Exactly.
It's very difficult to actually deal with it. And I have to admit that there were instances when I'm not proud of how I dealt with it, because I'm discriminated not just for being brown, but also for being Asian. There are different layers of discrimination that I experienced, which made me even more protective of my heritage. So that's one of the main drivers of creating the choreography. So to actually educate people about where I'm from and my heritage. Yeah. So that's how I deal with it. Try to be creative about it instead of being angry.
Ela disse que, na verdade, ela lida com várias camadas de discriminação. Tipo, uma é ela ser asiática, outra é a própria tom de pele dela, que ela chama de brown. Eu nunca tinha escutado isso antes, na verdade. Ela fala que o próprio tom de pele dela, na verdade, também ajuda nesse processo de discriminação, que ela tem lidado com várias camadas discriminatórias, na verdade. E por isso que ela, de alguma maneira, tenta lidar com isso de uma maneira não raivosa, mas criando arte em relação a isso.
So yeah, maybe we can show the video.
Yes, but before there is a question. Someone asking your yes, because I think this is a way to enter in the video, because someone asked you your experience related to Coromundus.
Mm-hmm. What about, what was the,
let me
what
see.
was the question? I think I saw it somewhere.
What are your experience in Coromundus as a person in Coromundus? With all your background, how you experienced Coromundus? With all of this you are bringing to us.
Coromundus had a very impactful, was an impactful factor for me, because the program made me realize that I actually needed to start confronting my fears. And this is my exposure to the sources that I was introduced to the kind of dances that I was seeing while in the program, and the people I was conversing with while in the program. So the program helped a lot. And it also sort of helped me push my way towards finding my cultural identity, because I was always scared. To be honest, I really was scared of handling these kinds of topics. But with the Coromundus program, I was able to find that kind of courage to start exploring and getting to know myself even better. Did I answer the question?
Yes, you answered. I have to translate now. Ela disse que, na verdade, o programa Coromundus, que foi o programa que ela fez e eu fiz também, ajudou ela de alguma maneira, encorajou ela de alguma maneira a encontrar a própria identidade dela. e a lidar com esses tópicos que para elas eram super difíceis e ainda continuam sendo ser difíceis, que é a questão da representação e a questão de quem é ela mesma, de quem é ela própria dentro desse universo da dança e do universo da antropologia, que é o que ela trabalha hoje. E as pinturas que vocês vão ver daqui a pouco. Por isso que, na verdade, o Coriomundos encorajou ela a ir em busca desse lugar. Eu acho que nós podemos ver o vídeo agora, né? Guardem as questões aí, tem muitas questões, acho que o vídeo vai suscitar mais questões ainda. O vídeo tem mais ou menos 15 minutos, aí ao final do vídeo, a gente volta a conversar aqui de novo, e aí ela responde todas essas questões pra gente, pode ser? Dani, vamos para o vídeo? Then we will be playing the video, and then we will be answering the questions. There is a lot of questions for you.
Okay. Finding the Mindanao Body started with a choreographic intention. It was motivated to confront my fear on representation of the Mindanao indigenous and Muslim communities. The fear was first introduced when I was in high school. A choreographer I admired was criticized for being culturally irresponsible when she stylized an Igorot dance and turned it into a ballet dance piece. The same thing happened with other well-known Philippine dance companies like the Bayanihan and Leyte Dance Theater, when their stylized folk dance aesthetics were frowned upon by some members of the indigenous and Muslim communities. What we need to understand about the voices of these communities is that they are rarely heard. I have this habit of asking my friends who like to be vocal for the causes of these communities, do we really know the story of the marginalized? There is no financial profit in that endeavor, unless when indigenous culture is hurled into the limelight to advance a few people's interests. The profit is always intangible, but not many like this kind of profit. I wonder too if I am guilty of this. Was my fear also my excuse? Did I fall into the same trap? This fear was fueled through the years, more so when my humanitarian work exposed me to the real story. I saw how indigenous knowledge and practices were threatened by armed insurgencies. I stole glimpses of that awful list of Lumad members killed, hoping that I will not stumble on names I knew. I saw how logging and mining companies encroached ancestral lands, how natural disasters displaced so many of them, and how the elders struggled to pass on traditions. It was this fear mainly that drove the intention to create a piece for messages that I cannot always explain clearly. The emotions, the history get in the way in presenting these messages in the same logic that is acceptable to those who take turns in wielding power. Fear that presenting its raw semblance may be ridiculed by Western aesthetics, or worst, reduced to the label of backward culture. I decided to confront this fear, and I used a form that is closest to my heart. Dance. I paid close attention to the ethical compass when I was structuring Finding the Mindanao Body. As a performing artist, I have a moral obligation on the creation and transmission of the dances, their segments, and even their stylized arrangements. I kept, modified, and removed elements in the material, which was quite frustrating as I was constantly restructuring the choreography. I think that the piece is not yet finished. For every time I rehearsed or staged a performance, there was always something new that I learned, a movement, a reaction, an opinion, an expression, or a feeling. And if I was truly being honest in my approach, I have to acknowledge everything that is revealed in the process. I was certain about my theme, but it was challenging because of the multiple needs attached to it. My commitment to the ethical compass pushed me to uncover so many layers. I had to constantly ask myself questions and reevaluate my choreographic intention. The questions became more complicated as I dove deeper into my theme. So in the end, I created an organic performance piece that mapped out the journey, stories, identity of a dancer from Mindanao. Usa ka komplikadong butang ang pagbiyahe pauli sa usa ka mananayaw nga gikan sa Mindanao. Dili pwedeng hisgutan ang mga bahin sa sayaw nga samara sa usa ka batid nga ipakita sa entablado. Kung asa ka mag-atubang sa mga tao aron magpasundayag sa imong teknik o pagkamamugnaon. Tingali para sa uban, ang pagsayaw kay alang sa prestihiyo o alang sa pasundayag. Dili lang kini ang among realidad. Adunay kulang sa ingon aning realidad sa pagsayaw. Alang kanamo, gibit-bit namo ang Mindanao nga kabahin sa among mga lawas. Makita nimo kini sa among mga mata, nga usahay na ay kalinaw, usahay maluluyon, kadaghanan sa panahon na ay kasuko tungod sa mga kasakit. Apan walay pildi. Makita nimo kini sa kurbada sa among mga bukog ug kusog sa among mga bukton ug abaga. Kay kami naanad sa pagdala sa mga gibug-aton. Bisan ang mga gibug-atong dili amo. Makita nimo kini sa among mga kamot sa tao nga nagpaningkamot malig-on nga paghawid, andam sa pagtabang, dili hamis, dili humok, kasaligan nga mga kamot.
Makita nimo kini sa among mga tiil, kanunay nga nalambigit sa yuta. Sa pakigsulti sa dayag, pinaagi sa pagtapik, paghagbo sa among mga tikod. Makita sab nimo kini sa among mga nagdukong tuhod. Timaan sa pagkamaayo. Di mahimo nga madugta kining tanan gikan sa among mga lawas. Bisan diin kami moadto gidala namo kini. Nakakat-on man og bag-ong mga estilo sa sayaw gikan sa mga langyaw. Ang Mindanao kay kanunay gihapong makita sa among mga lawas. Ug kung giunsa sa among lawas makiglambigit sa among palibot. Usa ka komplikadong butang ang pagbiyahe pauli sa usa ka mananayaw nga gikan sa Mindanao.
Okay.
É...
Thank you.
Eu vou deixar vocês dois agora na tradução e eu vou para as perguntas aqui, trazendo as perguntas para cá, porque daí eu descanso um pouco também, pode ser? They will be playing with you with the questions, they will be translating, because I will be with the questions of the students. There is one question, a questão da Alessandra. Dani, você pode colocar a questão da Alessandra, que está lá em cima, que ela perguntou das diferenças pedagógicas, que eu acho que está conectado um pouco com o vídeo também. Yes. Vai lá, meninos.
Okay,
Alessandra,
so I already,
okay.
yes, I already did that. You can read, please.
Should I answer the questions that were posted here? The
Yes.
ones that you've
Yes.
translated into English?
Yes, be translated, yes.
Okay. So it says here that, is there a possibility of extinction of the habits
Sorry,
of
this
those
is
cultures
Alessandra
you
first.
research?
It's
Okay.
the second
these
question in the list.
The second question, yes.
Second, what is the main difference between the pedagogical practices you experience between the Western native dance classes? Okay, I guess in a gist, I can say that what I've observed is for the Western ones, it's more theatricalized. I don't know if it's the right word to use, but it's also sort of brushing off also on the way we are presenting some of our folk and ethnic dances now by some of our well-known dance groups in the Philippines. So everything is turning towards that that direction in the theatricalization of the dances. So everything is big, everything is exaggerated. You know, even the costumes. I would like to touch base on the costumes also, because someone mentioned here about costumes of the ethnic dances. And I guess it sort of swerves away from the original context from where these dances are from when they are presented. This was also one of the things that I tackled in finding the Mindanao Body. When I was putting on the costume, I was actually asked that, why are you using some of the costume or the accessories of different groups? Because for those who are familiar with Mindanao, they would say, okay, this one is coming from Tiboy, this one is coming from Manobo, and then Bagobo. And I said, exactly, because Mindanao is not just about one ethnic group. There are several ethnic groups in Mindanao. And I specifically wanted to use the pieces of the groups who were actually affected by the displacement that I was talking about. So those choices for the jewelry, for the garments were carefully thought, because I wanted those groups to be emphasized. And also, when I was changing the costume, there was no theatricalization there. I wanted to present it as how a Mindanaoan or a Mindanaoan dance artist would actually put on the costume without doing the exaggeration of putting on the earrings like this or anything that usually you make it big. But there, I decided, I took the risk of making it as normal and as raw as possible because I wanted people to actually pay attention to these pieces, to what I'm doing, because I didn't want to make it look so staged. And this time I wanted the audience to look and not just, you know, expect some staged performance. And it was a risk that I took because every time you, this is actually discussed in my paper in Finding the Mindanao Body. It's a risk that you take when you take this kind of path in presenting your work, because there's always a tendency that the audience will lose interest. Oh, she's changing costume. It's so boring. It's not something that a lot of people appreciate. So anyway, yeah. So there. Sorry, I've been blabbering on again.
I know you.
Yeah, quiet. Okay. I'm gonna.
We have to translate this.
Bom, ela quis dizer basicamente que a ocidental é mais teatral, né? Tem mais performance, é tudo feito exageradamente, tudo muito grande. E tanto é que na apresentação dela, ela comentou até mesmo sobre o figurino, que quando ela fez uma troca de figurino, ela quis fazer o mais natural possível, o mais normal possível, para que as pessoas percebessem, tipo, o figurino em si, e não a ação dela trocar o figurino, né? E aí o Luan pode me ajudar também.
Sorry, what happened? I didn't know what happened. I apologize for that. I don't know what exactly happened.
No problem.
Yes, Gustavo, you were saying something.
Yes, I was translating for everybody.
He was translating what we are still translating what you said previously.
Ela não queria que pensasse na cultura, né, nas vestimentas como algo exacerbado, né? Acho que ela menciona isso também. Ela queria mostrar a peculiaridade, a simplicidade, né? Apesar de ser muito material, joias, isso, aquilo, ela não queria fazer tudo com muito detalhe de exagerismo, né? Trazer isso com exageros. Então, acho que foi bem isso. Ela levou a questão da Alessandra, né, para da Valéria também. Né? Então, ela já responde as duas em uma.
E aí ela fala também que, na verdade, ela usa peças de figurinos de diferentes grupos. Não é de um grupo só. Ela pega pedaços, porque Mindanao, para ela, significa diversidade. Tipo, é uma diversidade de diferentes grupos. Então, ela quis trazer, na verdade, para o próprio corpo dela, essa diversidade de todos os grupos que habitam ali. Vamos para a pergunta do seu Brito.
Isso.
Senhor Brito.
Is there
is a question. Yes,
there's the first question on the list now.
Is there a possibility of extinction of the habits of these cultures you research? Do these small communities have support or are persecuted out there? Okay, I think the first question, I've sort of touched based on this about the possibility of extinction because of the displacement issue. So like what I've mentioned before, there's a possibility that if the group is displaced and they end up in a place where there's another group, there's a dominant group, and sometimes they end up in the cities or in the outskirts of the cities, that's when they sort of swivel around disappearance or maintaining it. So there's that. And then as for the second, do these small communities have support? Yes, but not as much as we hope that they would have. And there's an organization, there are organizations who actually help, and there are also local government units assigned in addressing their needs and helping them out with their causes. And then lastly, are they persecuted? Yes, I'm gonna say it bluntly like that. Yes, as much as you might probably encounter some Filipinos who would say that, no, that's not happening, but it is happening. And I think it's time that we acknowledge this, that this is happening, because sometimes people are not really aware, or maybe they are aware, however, they choose not to pay attention to it. Yeah.
Vocês vão traduzir? Agora é com vocês, eu estou descansando um pouco. Vou deixar vocês um pouquinho.
Bom, começando, foram 3 perguntas, né?
Foram 3 perguntas, sim.
Deixa eu só achar aqui o comentário. Sobre a perseguição. Ela diz que sim. Vou começar de trás para frente. Os grupos são perseguidos. Algumas pessoas evitam até de falar sobre isso, mas ela acredita que é agora que a gente tem que falar sobre, para as pessoas terem ciência de tudo o que acontece. Então, sim, existem perseguições.
Uhum.
Sobre o suporte. Ela diz que sim, tem suporte do governo e tudo mais, mas não quanto eles gostariam, né? E... sobre a extinção. Eu não entendi muito bem essa parte.
Então, aí ela comenta que ela já falou isso, né, na primeira pergunta que a gente teve lá no começo do bate-papo, né, que falou do tufão e, né, dos madeireiros e como eles se separam, né? Então, é daí que vai se dando essa perca, né, de cultura, né, das origens.
I would like to make you a questions connected with the pedagogical practices, because in the video you talk about your fears in keeping the compass.
The ethical compass, yes.
Yes, and there is a question here related to the pedagogical practices, related to how you experience it, the pedagogical differences related to the Western and the native way of perceiving in a pedagogical way the practice that you are exposed to.
Well, one thing, the difference is when you're actually learning from community elders, what they do is they explain what the dance is for, why you're doing it, what's the purpose. So there's always an attached purpose to it. To what the dances are for. For instance, if you're learning a ritual dance, and the ritual dance will, okay, this is how you do it, and that's why you have to pay attention that your knees are bent in this manner because this dance is talking or communicating with the spirits. And then if you actually straighten your legs, that means something. So every movement that you actually do has a social-cultural representation or meaning. But for Western dances, what I've observed is it's more technique. It's more, so in that sense, that's the difference that I see.
A minha conexão caiu, então eu não ouvi o que ela falou. Vocês, por favor, me ajudem.
Agora.
Luan?
Eu estava traduzindo aqui umas perguntas.
Okay, Dan, could you answer again, because my connection went down and I couldn't hear. Can you just summarize?
Okay. What I've observed, example, if you're learning from a community of the dance from the community elders, is that you do this dance because there are social-cultural representations or meanings to what you are doing, to every action that you do. So, like what I was doing in the dance and finding the Mindanao Body, maintaining the bent knee was important because that dance was supposed to be a talk or an interaction with the spirits. So if you straighten your legs, that would imply something else. It's an entirely different meaning. So there's that. But if you, let's say in a gist, if you're learning for the Western dances, what I observed was there was emphasis on technique.
Ok. I will be translating. Ela disse que, na verdade, que toda movimentação que vem das comunidades onde ela trabalhou, todo movimento ele está atrelado a um significado. Então, se ela está com as costas curvadas, é porque isso tem um significado para eles, a relação com os ancestrais. E aí o que ela diz, na verdade, é que as danças que ela experienciou de forma ocidental está muito mais ligada a uma questão da técnica, e não necessariamente é um significado para o movimento. O movimento dentro das aldeias onde ela trabalha, os movimentos, eles têm sentidos relacionais. There is a question here from Sérgio also. He would like you talking about in the moment that you are doing, you change your clothes, you are wearing a kind of Western, I don't know, this is my interpretation. You, in the first part of the video, you are wearing Western clothes, and then there is a moment that you are doing this modification of the clothes. He would like you to talk about this, why you are doing this, and why you are doing everything over the right clothes.
Okay, okay. So the story of finding the Mindanao Body is about retracing the roots. So I started because the fear was realized and acknowledged at the point where I was dominantly using contemporary dance. So I started off with that. And then I sort of went backwards. So that's why in the movement, I was starting to distort the lines. I was already doing a lot of contractions, and I was trying to move away from ballet. So, and then later on, when I was changing the costume, that was me removing, that was a representation of me removing that influence, that Western influence. But of course, I couldn't, like, there are two reasons why I kept the white. One is because I didn't want to, I was not going to be naked when I changed clothes, because if you're in the dressing room, of course, you remove everything, right? But in front of an audience, I wasn't going to take that chance. And then second, also, what I've mentioned already in a while back, that even though I was retracing my roots, I think it would be unfair to completely remove my Western dance style influence. I think for me, because my art also, because it also contributed to the art that I actually create now. And it's just about paying respects also to that. So I kept it. It was under the indigenous costume, the garb. But this time I wanted to highlight the indigenous costume, and that's why it was on top of that. So that's the explanation for the change of costume and how they were placed.
I have to translate before I come back. Peraí, deixa eu ver enquanto a técnica tiver assim um significado da expressão, você quer retomar esse tipo de discussão e tentar fazer ruir este pensamento técnico como um fim, não como um meio. Ok. Eu vou tentar traduzir aqui e já coloco também a fala que a Alessandra colocou e eu explico para ela também. Dani, você consegue remover para eu conversar com a Dani? Obrigado. Ela disse que, na verdade, todo esse trabalho tem a ver com ela rememorar a própria trajetória dela na dança. E ela acha, e ela diz aqui, ela falou mais no final aqui, que ela considera totalmente unfair, quer dizer, que significa que não é justo com ela mesma ela remover tudo o que existe na vida dela, seja a técnica ocidental ou sejam as técnicas orientais. Então, ela diz que, na verdade, ela coloca tudo em cima do branco, e algumas vezes ela tenta, de alguma maneira, distorcer as linhas que existem no corpo dela também, porque ela falava que, no princípio, ela achava que ela tinha que remover tudo isso do corpo dela, e agora ela entende que não, que tudo isso faz parte de quem é ela, justamente porque ela é uma bailarina que também fala com uma audiência que é ocidental. Então, ela acha que não seria justo com ela mesma e com as próprias técnicas e relações que existem no próprio corpo dela. Então, por isso, Sérgio, que naquele momento de troca, ela vai sobrepondo isso, ela vai sobrepondo essas camadas, porque todas essas camadas, na verdade, constituem a identidade dela. E é sobre isso que é o trabalho dela atualmente. Then Alessandra told you she made a kind of a comment here saying that she believed that while the technique will be above all the expression, we'll have to return in this kind of discussion all the time, because it's this that's happened for you, and that happened for us as well, because you also live this kind of situation here in Brazil. This discussion about technique and expression, I think that happened also here in Brazil. She made a comment.
Yeah, it's the same in the Philippines also. So it's like a national discourse.
Ela diz que a Alessandra, ela diz que isso é um tipo de discurso nacional nas Filipinas também. I would like to go through for us to be, we are near the end now, and we have two things to show.
Okay.
Yes, I would like to show your paintings and show the link for your writings.
Okay.
We can go through this.
And Ebola or no?
Yes, Ebola.
Okay,
Just
okay.
to finish the discussion.
Okay.
Dani, você pode passar as pinturas? A Dana, ela é uma multiartista, ela trabalha com pintura, ela trabalha com escritas, ela é uma universitária também, né, tipo, ela escreve, ela recentemente, ela acabou de publicar 2 artigos, na verdade, um sobre a pesquisa que ela fez sobre o Ebola, em Serra Leoa, que foi onde eu acompanhei mais de perto, porque foi o processo dela do mestrado, no momento que eu estava fazendo o mestrado também. A gente só queria trazer essas coisas agora para ir finalizando, na verdade. Então, tem as pinturas, ela fez as pinturas sobre todo esse processo do trabalho dela, e aí a última parte seria um pouco falar também sobre esse processo de escrita. E aí, se vocês tiverem mais questões para perguntar para ela, a gente vai fazendo aqui. Would you like to make some comments in your paintings?
The point of the painting was, I think it's important that if we can articulate our dance, if we can articulate dance through other forms like painting, writing, or collaboration with other disciplines or fields, then we should do that. And that is what I'm trying to do, because what I want to do with dance is to actually expand its reach outside the dance community, because I am so fed up of always being said that, okay, you're a dancer, your label is a dancer, and you are to perform on stage. So your tools are all connected to entertainment, which is actually something that I think is quite restrictive, because dance can also have principles and concepts that might actually work in other disciplines. And this is what I was pushing for with the Ebola research, where we use the movement analysis in mapping out the chain of transmission of the Ebola virus. So yes, so that's one way of trying to connect it to other disciplines, and finding these links that are almost all the time invisible. And I think as scholars, as dance artists, as researchers, we have the responsibility to actually make these invisible concepts visible for those who have a limited impression of dance or dance artists.
I'm trying to concentrate here to translate. Ela diz que, na verdade, nesse momento, ela passa por um processo de articulação e rearticulação de todos os trabalhos dela. E ela acha muito limitante, na verdade, o lugar da dança de ser confinado apenas a um processo criativo que você apresenta no palco. Ela tenta encontrar, dentro das ferramentas e de todas as possibilidades delas, encontrar outras maneiras de falar sobre dança para outros tipos de audiências, que ela chama, né, de outros públicos. Ela diz que isso é uma responsabilidade dela enquanto artista, e isso eu acho muito bonito da fala dela. Lugar que ela diz que, na verdade, é uma responsabilidade dela enquanto artista encontrar formas e maneiras de falar sobre o que ela faz com um público diverso. E aí, por isso as pinturas também, e aí ela falou do trabalho que ela fez sobre o Ebola. Eu não falei sobre isso para vocês, mas ela tem, a pesquisa de mestrado dela, ela faz uma análise da dança ritual, de uma dança funeral que acontece em Serra Leoa, onde os corpos dos mortos, eles precisam ser lavados seguindo os rituais tradicionais. E uma questão que aconteceu quando ela foi lá pesquisar isso é que exatamente esse ritual era um dos procedimentos considerados também responsáveis por transmitir o Ebola. Então, ela foi lá para trabalhar, para entender como exatamente poderia, as comunidades tradicionais poderia, de alguma maneira, manter os seus ritos tradicionais, mas ainda assim trabalhar com fazer com que essa cadeia de transmissão do Ebola pudesse ser retida naquele determinado lugar. I was explaining your research because they don't know your research about Ebola.
Oh, okay.
Just me. There is a question here from Sergio. He said that your search for other spaces and other audience is expiring, and this also has been moved a lot of artists today in these times of pandemic situations. So I believe.
Yeah.
Talk a bit about pandemic situation, because you faced this during Ebola and you used your knowledge in dance to overcoming the situation. I believe you could talk a bit about this.
Okay. The goal of the research then was to actually find connections because I was, like what I said, I was tired of being constrained within this particular box that as a dancer, that is what you are. So I said, there is a connection and I have to find something really big. And that's where, and since I have humanitarian background, I touch base with the Ebola outbreak response. And the biggest question that I encountered was, what is the connection of dance in something so scientific as an epidemic like Ebola? And what I did was I actually documented the funeral ceremonies of selected ethnic groups in Sierra Leone, and then used a movement analysis to actually document the movement of what is being done during those ceremonies. Because the thing with Ebola is you get infected if there's contact. And what they did back then was they completely, in order to stop the contact that is happening, they said, okay, no more of the ceremonies. We have to get rid of them. It's causing the infection. And the problem was there was a lot of rejection of that from the communities, because you are trying to take away something that has been with us for generations, and then here comes Ebola, and so you're ripping it out. You're ripping us away from our cultural practices. So by understanding the social cultural relevance of these cultural practices and identifying where in the cultural practice the contact was happening, because the movement analysis was able to identify where the physical contact was happening, then they didn't have to remove the whole cultural practice anymore. They only had to pay attention to those parts where the physical contact was happening. Hence, there's still sensitivity towards the cultural practices. So that's what the paper was all about, using a dance principle such as a movement analysis to document something that is very scientific, like a disease. So they can read about it in the paper.
Okay, let me translate this. Ela disse que, na verdade, ela fez nessa pesquisa específica em relação ao Ebola, ela fez uma análise de uma coisa que aparentemente é extremamente científica, que é o espalhamento de uma doença. Na verdade, ela fez uma análise, ela documentou, na verdade, o passo a passo desse ritual, e ela fez uma análise sobre a dança que acontece nesse ritual, para ela realmente conseguir entender quais eram os momentos da dança onde existia o contato físico, porque era exatamente nesse momento do contato físico em que o vírus ele se espalhava. E aí, ela diz, na verdade, é que ela usou o conhecimento dela que ela tem nas questões humanitárias e as questões delas relacionadas à dança, porque ela acredita que, na verdade, é algo que é feito durante séculos e séculos por determinados grupos. Você não pode simplesmente retirar esses hábitos dessas pessoas sem entender quais são esses hábitos. Tipo, para eles é uma cerimônia sagrada. E essa cerimônia sagrada, ela pode ser mantida assim, se você retirar algumas pequenas questões ali que são responsáveis pelo espalhamento da doença, e não como era feito anteriormente, que eles impediam, na verdade, que esses tradicionais fizessem os rituais. Ela encontrou ali, no conhecimento dela de dança, junto com eles, ouvindo a voz deles, ela encontrou ali uma solução que pudesse ser trabalhado tanto pela questão da dança como pela questão científica, que foi a análise da dança, foi a análise desse ritual em si, análise do que acontece ali em termos físicos. Acho que é isso, meninos. Esqueci alguma coisa?
Maybe you can show the video.
Yes, I believe we can show the video, because you talk a lot of things and easy to keep tracking. We can show the video. Dani?
2014 to 2016 Ebola outbreak, the trends in West Africa demonstrated that scientific methods alone were not sufficient enough to control the Ebola virus disease without consideration of the social-cultural contexts. In understanding the shortcomings of scientific lens, anthropological researchers started exploring the nature of the outbreak, and only then was the role of culture emphasized in the disease transmission. Now, what we need to understand is cultural practices were instrumental in mapping out how the virus acted on the perceptions of sickness and death of the local communities. Largely unknown until it was pushed into the limelight, cultural practices like the funeral ceremonies were announced to have contributed to the spread of the virus. There was a drawback from humanitarian and state actors to immediately realize that understanding and archiving cultural practices like funerals can also help stop Ebola's chain of infection. As a dance anthropologist, I used a medium that appeared out of place in such a scientific dilemma. However, embodied techniques observed in funeral ceremonies can be documented using dance movement analysis tools. The movement analysis demonstrated that embodied techniques were not only symbolical and functional, but also fatal in the spread of the virus. It should be noted that the regular and collective performance of these embodied techniques explicated beliefs and negotiation dexterities during critical events such as the Ebola outbreak.
Because anything bad, anybody where you depend, people all man know say this not bad. Because Quran says that tell you say, but who bad then they all man say what bad.
Kono be fa kelima kono na yiri ba bera kono be nyensinda kono be na kelima kono be fa kelima kono na yiri ba bera kono be nyensinda kono be na kelima o kono be fa kelima felteni na yiri ba bera kono be nyensinda kono na kelima kono be fa kelima kono na yiri ba bera kono be nyensinda kono be na kelima kono be fa kelima kono na yiri ba bera kono be nyensinda kono be fa kelima kono be fa kelima kono na yiri ba bera kono be nyensinda.
Alguém tem mais alguma pergunta sobre esses processos todos? Eu acho que aqui vai ficando claro, agora que a gente vai chegando no final, vai ficando claro, assim, tipo, que a Dana é uma artista que ela vai trabalhando, assim, em múltiplas plataformas, de muitas maneiras. Ela vai criando muitas possibilidades, na verdade, de conversar com públicos de formas muito diversas. E para a gente aqui, na verdade, ela fez um convite, ela tem uma página no Facebook chamada Dialogue of Cultures, eu já participei dessa página dela. Ela gostaria de fazer um convite para vocês, na verdade, de conversarem com ela por essa página, se vocês pudessem. Aqui tá o link para a página dela no Facebook. Ela gostaria, na verdade, de convidar vocês para ir lá, fazer comentários sobre essa fala aqui, colocar questões que vocês estão vivendo também, mesmo em português, não tem problema, a gente dá um jeito aqui nas traduções, mas ela tem feito muito esse trabalho, assim, de realmente conseguir fazer conexões entre diferentes culturas. Isso é muito perceptível no trabalho dela, escrito, nas pinturas, na dança, de todas as maneiras possíveis, ela está tentando fazer essas conexões assim ao redor do mundo. I was explaining for the students the work and how I admire you. We are friends, but I never had the time to say how I admire you and how I'm glad to have you here to talking with us.
Thank you. Thank you also for allowing me to talk about this. because I think it's important that this is discussed, the possibilities that we can actually explore, and not limit ourselves within what we have been labeled or boxed in. So that's something that I'm fighting against, and I hope more people will actually dive into it and start exploring and talking about their works, not just on stage, because you can actually translate your works into different mediums. So, yeah.
Yes, people are saying thank you for you. They say that the respect that you have with the practice, the rituals, the ancestral rituals and the traditionals is very delicate, and how can I don't know how can I say pulsante in English, but this is quite inspiring, and they are.
Thank you.
Luan, você sabe como dizer pulsante em inglês? It's vibrating. I think it's like.
It's vibrating. Yes.
Vibrating.
Okay. Thank you.
They're saying that all the respect that you have for all of this is vibrating. It's amazing to see this.
Yes, and it's really exciting if people start working on towards that direction also, to explore the possibilities, discover the possibilities.
Ela está convidando vocês a descobrir todas as possibilidades. No, because I presented your Facebook pages, and I encouraged the students to talk with you and write even in Portuguese. I said that there is no problem, because we can translate for you later.
Yes.
To your Facebook page, the Dialogue of Culture, because I already participated from one of your works, and I'm saying that I was encouraging them to go there.
Okay. Thank you.
Everyone is saying yes, it was amazing.
Thank you.
Incredible.
In my language, I say daghang salamat sa inyong tanan. My native tongue. That's not Filipino. Because it's different. My native tongue is not the same as the national language or Filipino language.
Okay.
So yeah.
People are saying here that the good thing that this remote moment can bring us is the possibility to see another reference that come from so distant from us. As
Yes.
Philippines, you are from Philippines, and it's hard for us to have in contact with a kind of artist like you. So for us, it's a very good way to kind of contact. And
so there's the benefits of what happened in this COVID-19 pandemic.
Yes.
We are linked in digitally.
Exactly. I can have you here in my house.
Yes.
And Sergio made one comment here. He said that your situation within the Ebola also has some similarities here in Brazil because of the pandemic situation. We have a lot of laws like candomblé, that I am from part, that we are not doing our traditional rituals now because of the COVID-19 outbreak. And he's saying that your research makes us understand that we have to understand how the body manifested in the history of our ancestries.
Yes, yes.
Is this? You are amazing.
Okay, thank you.
Is this? We'll be finishing here. Anything else?
All right. No. I hope that you can share with them the papers, so that if they want to know more about the research that I did, the Ebola and the finding the Mindanao Body, they could read the research papers that's in the publication. So because it really helps to understand your process and to talk about it, to analyze and reflect on it, and then you'd be more confident in defending your creative choices.
Thank you. Ela disse que, na verdade, que ela deixou o link de todas as coisas, a gente mandou alguns já para vocês, outros ainda a gente vai mandar, existem aí os escritos que ela fez sobre o processo do Finding Mindanao Body e também a pesquisa que ela fez lá junto com a Ebola, e ela disse que se isso puder ajudar a gente de alguma maneira, ela fica extremamente feliz em compartilhar isso com a gente. Thank you, Dan.
Yes, you're
So
welcome.
much.
Thank you also. Thank you.
Bye.
And thank you everyone for listening in and for your comments. And I'll be talking to Hobson about the comments.
Okay.
So thank you. And keep safe.
Também. Ela agradeceu todos os comentários, pediu para todo mundo continuar safe. Keep safe. Thank you. See you.
Okay. Bye.
Bye. See you.